Let's talk about the upcoming Terminator 6 movie. Now, with Terminator Genesis, what they did was that was supposed to be the beginning of a brand new Terminator trilogy where they were going to effectively erase Terminator 3 and 4, and then in a weird way they wound up erasing Terminator 1, 2, 3, and 4. And now with Terminator 6, it's going to be, it's just funny. I can't even talk about it without laughing. Yeah. They're going to be erasing 3, 4, and 5, and maybe 1 and 2, but probably not 1 and 2 because Linda Hamilton's in the movie as older Linda Hamilton, which erases 3 because she's supposed to be dead in 3. Same thing with 4. And in 5, she's, the Game of Thrones chick. Oh, okay, whatever.
I forget what her name is.
On Game of Thrones, I never watched the show, so I couldn't tell you. But Emilia Clarke is her name, and I know you're a big fan of hers. By the way, folks, that's Mike from Laughing Stock Cinema.
Hey guys, it's Mike here from Laughing Stock Cinema and Media. How's it going?
We know you're a big Terminator fan, so I figured you'd be the best person to come on here on this, long-time Geekdom movie talk. We haven't done one of these in a while, talk about Terminator 6. So, what are you expecting from this thing? Because I just feel like with Terminator 3, I thought it was an okay film. Step down from 2, and of course we're talking about 3 first because 1 and 2 are the James Cameron canon films, and then we have 4, which is I thought 4 was a very underrated film, and I liked it even though I didn't love everything in the movie. And then we have 5, which erased 3 and 4. It had a lot of time travel problems. Ultimately, the movie did not age very well, even though I enjoyed it the first time I watched it. It really did not age well, but it did try something new, and that was sort of taking what we knew about the Terminator franchise and making a new series. And don't even get me started on the Sarah Connor Chronicles. That's a whole different thing. So what are you expecting from Terminator 6? And we do know also that the story was conceived by James Cameron and by Tim Miller, the director. So James Cameron was involved in this story.
Yeah, that's something that from day one when I heard that the rights were going to revert basically back to James Cameron, that was something that gave me a little bit of hope in this future film. Now, basically, what my expectations are going into it, I expect it to at least be a solid movie, like you have James Cameron behind it, like we said, and Tim Miller, the director of the original Deadpool, which, as we all know, that was a great movie. So, putting Linda Hamilton back into the role of Sarah Connor as this older, badass Linda Hamilton, and, having it take place after the best Terminator movie, and, having the creative minds in part behind it who were behind the first 2 films, I feel like that's definitely going to give this some more, I guess you could say, Terminator gravitas. It's going to be more of something that Terminator fans, especially hardcore fans of the franchise like myself, can really gravitate toward. But in terms of the story, I'm not entirely too sure because, they've been a little scarce about what is going to entail in it, other than the fact that it takes place after 2, and unlike in the third one, Linda Hamilton hasn't, died of leukemia or whatever they claim that she had died in that original one.
Yeah, that's been erased. She's going to be alive. We know that.
It's all gone. It's like a retcon movie.
Sarah Connor's alive, yeah.
Yeah, so I'm not too sure what they're going to do with the story. One of the things I have been kind of thinking is odd is that they haven't really mentioned John Connor. I think we
know that Jude Colley's playing John Connor. We know that there's going to be a character named Danny Ramos and have a brother. And we know there's another Terminator that's being played by Gabriel Luna, of all people, from Rogue One. And, of course, Arnold, of course.
Of course.
So I don't know. Do we even have a timeline placement for this film? We know that it's an older Linda Hamilton and older Sarah Connor, so I could imagine it taking place maybe even in 2018, but is it going to just be sort of like what 3 was, where we find out that they actually did not prevent Judgment Day in Part 2, they just postponed it? Is that what's going to happen here?
I wouldn't be surprised, because that's kind of like, if you're going to do another Terminator movie, obviously if there's Terminators going back in time trying to assassinate Linda Hamilton, Sarah Connor, and trying to assassinate, other people that are important to the future resistance, then that must mean that the robots and Skynet still exist in the future in order to send them back, unless they're going to pull another alternate timeline thing and be like, oh, this is the Skynet that survived in this timeline, and it's trying to make Skynet alive in this timeline again. But In terms of Terminator 3, I feel like one of the biggest problems with that wasn't so much the story as it was the tone. It was way too comedic. It almost felt like a parody of the first Terminator or the first two Terminators. So, with Tim Miller directing this, that kind of gives me a little bit of pause in that direction. I hope they don't go super slapsticky comedic again in this film, but, it's certainly, I guess, open to be a possibility.
I mean, no, I'm just a little confused because if you remember when Terminator 4 was coming out, Salvation, the original plan, because this is what happens when you have different creative people like Mick G and everybody has their own idea. The original idea was they were going to make another trilogy with Terminator 4 where it was going to be 4, 5, and 6 were going to be the future war. And the talk was that at the end of 6 they were going to have Kyle Reese go back in time to the first movie, and then boom, we have that all over again. That's what we had been talked about for years and years and years. And then when Genesis came out, again, they kind of did something similar where they decided to go back and really reboot everything. But the problem with Genesis was there were so many unanswered questions. We never found out who sent that Terminator back to the 70s to rescue young Sarah Connor.
Those files were deleted or whatever he said.
Yeah, we never found out who deleted the files. We never found out what the actual fate of the real John Connor was. We know that he was assimilated, but we don't know exactly what happened in the future timeline, and we don't even know how it even existed if in the Terminator timeline two timelines cannot split, especially since we have that whole thing where Kyle Reese in that movie, Jay Courtney's Kyle Reese, was having memories that didn't really exist. With that whole...
Well, that's one of the things with the Terminator movies. It seems like in every subsequent film
they change the rules, right?
Yeah. I mean, even Terminator 2 did that, because, the whole thing with the first film, it was a deterministic future. It was something that was a causality loop in which John Connor sends his own father back in time so that John Connor can be born, Even though his father was born far after him, because of time travel, it caused a loop in which basically John would always be born, defeat Skynet in the future. They would send Terminator back as a last-ditch effort. But it would fail, and so on.
That's only with the deleted scenes included, because deleted scenes is the ones that talked about, the Cyberdyne Systems finding the arm and whatnot in the chip, which was talked about in Terminator 2. But that being said, I had always thought when I was a kid that what actually had happened was somebody else had impregnated Sarah Connor in the past, not Kyle Reese, someone else did, and that Kyle Reese going back in time and impregnating her changed the timeline, and that's what led to the events of Terminator 2. Because if Terminator 1, like you said, it's a causality loop, Skynet had already lost. Kyle Reese stated that, the war was over. They smashed their defense grid. That's what he said in the first movie. And the last-ditch effort was send Terminator back in time. But if that was the last-ditch effort, where the hell did the T-1000 come from? See what I'm saying? Because when you're talking about time, they couldn't have sent anybody else back. Because he even said they blew the place up. They destroyed the entire timeline. I'm sorry, the time machine.
Especially with the future films after that, you really have to cram in a lot of events happening in a really short period of time. I think from the novelization of Terminator 2, it states that basically what happened was Skynet sent the first Terminator back, and immediately things would have changed if he succeeded, but he didn't succeed. So as the real last-ditch effort, they sent back this crazy prototype that they couldn't really control, who basically has a more even advanced AI system than Skynet. Yeah, the T-1000.
Yeah, but the problem with that is that Kyle Reese said they had smashed the defense grid and they had already won. Did they have another time machine? See, they could have explained all this if they actually gave us a good future war movie. Maybe they have a separate time machine for the T-1000. Maybe they could have had a scene where they send Arnold back the T-800 from the first film, and then maybe they could have been in there, and then Skynet says, alert, mission failed, because they knew that the Terminator didn't immediately, like you said, didn't immediately change the future. So then they opened up the other time machine, and then John Connor could be like, oh shit, and then maybe they could bust out the reprogrammed T-800. See, the whole thing could have been fixed with just one movie. We never got it. We never got our future war movie. We always got scenes, and we got stuff in Salvation, but we never got a future war movie. And this is not going to be it. We're still not getting it with Terminator 6, man.
I don't know if we're ever going to. The closest we got was Salvation, Salvation, which, a lot of people don't like it, and before Genesis came out, they said it was the worst one, but I always thought it was the third best if we're going to count 1, 2, 3, and Salvation. Like, 3 really just, for me, even though it has Arnold, which is the only negative for me that Salvation really takes away from it, as well as the Marcus character, I just feel like, 3, just the tone and what they were going for, I don't know, it just doesn't really mesh well for me with the rest of the films. But to be fair to James Cameron, at least, in the original script for Terminator 2, and they never shot this scene, I think, because of budgetary limitations, he wanted to do, like, a whole opening to the movie where they take place in the future, where John Connor, like, smashes, defeats them, basically, Skynet, and they break in, and they had already sent through a Terminator. So then after that happens, they send Kyle Reese, and then immediately afterward, he goes into, like, the cooling section, the refrigerator, basically, where they keep all the Terminators, and then would send Arnold back in time, basically, and that's where Terminator 2 would have started. So, it would have been nice to see that filmed. That's one of the scenes I always wanted to see filmed. It never happened, but maybe they can kind of co-opt that scene and put it in here. I mean, I think that could definitely help explain some of the time travel shenanigans here.
Yeah, I mean, maybe they could put it at the beginning of the film, because it seems like all the Terminator movies kind of have that, where they start in the future and then they go back. So I just wonder what they're going to do to explain, because I mean, I love time travel stories, and I think that time travel and action is really kind of, the whole sci-fi action thing is what made these movies so great. But you could even classify Terminator 1 as a horror film. I don't.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, I don't.
I think
but
there's definitely a lot of horror elements to it. I feel like it's kind of like Alien versus Aliens, which is funny because James Cameron made Aliens, where the first one is more like horror inspired and it's like scarier, whereas the second one is like a straight up action movie. So, I feel like that's one of the genius parts behind the whole Terminator franchise, how like it's adapted over the years.
Yeah, I agree. I just wonder what they could do. Like, let me ask you a question, okay? Because, look, I love Terminator probably as much as you do. You said Terminator 2 is your favorite movie of all time. So that's pretty big. And I love this franchise, but I feel like every time they put out a new movie, it just goes, like, you think it's going to go in the right direction, and either it does, and then they reboot it again, or it goes in the wrong direction. So what would you do? Like, if James Cameron came to you and said, okay, make me a Terminator film, what would you do? Because I'll be honest with you. I mean, I know I'm putting you on the spot right now. I would just be kind of confused about what to do at this point with all this other stuff we have out now.
I mean, honestly, I feel like it can go either two different directions. The first one would be just do the whole future war, just see what happens, the end of Skynet, like the whole battle, basically all the humans put in like the extermination camps, just like everything that Kyle Reese discussed in the first film, just like finally show us that and finally show us like where it all ends, because like, eventually they're going to have to do a final Terminator movie, at least, I would assume so.
Well, unless they reboot it from scratch and just start over again. Like
again and again and again forever. But, I would like to see that. Or another thing which would be a little wacky, but I think could be fun, is if they send a Terminator back, like, hundreds of years in the past or something,
You mean like the Mad TV Terminator 3 where he tried to stop Jesus from getting killed?
Yeah, something like that. Or even like a Wild West. Like, you send a Terminator back to, like, the Wild West of California.
We saw that already in Back to the Future Part 3.
Basically, yeah, like you could do something like Back to the Future 3, except like he's trying to defend John Connor's great-great-great-grandfather, and basically you have like another Terminator who's like dressed in all black, like an evil gunslinger who's trying to get to him, and you have like a showdown at high noon and everything. Or you can even have it take place in the Middle Ages and have them be like fighting on the battlefield and everything, wacky, just go in like Arnold a completely different direction.
Arnold could be the Terminator and Conan the Barbarian in one movie, bro.
Maybe it's all connected. It's a connected universe.
Oh, God. You know what, though? It's kind of funny because you talk about the time travel rules being changed. And remember, in Terminator 1, Kyle Reese said you couldn't go back to the future. There's no way. Yeah. But yet, in Terminator Genesis, they figured out a way to do it. Not to mention that if you remember, the real Terminator 3 is the Terminator 2 ride at
Yeah.
Universal. That's the real Terminator 3 because that's James Cameron's canon. Even though it makes literally no sense when they fight the T-1 million and there's all kinds of wackiness. Somehow T-1000 in the future. You know what, though? I'm cool with it because Robert Patrick got another payday and so did Eddie Furlong, and that's always a good thing. But that's supposed to be the end. They go to Skynet, the big pyramid, and it's like... That's pretty much like, to me, like James Cameron's vision of what that would have probably been like, you know, if he had made a movie. So we did get that. It's kind of. I'm saying kind of here because not everybody watching this has probably seen that.
Yeah, I don't even know if it's there anymore.
No, it's not in Orlando, but I think the footage, you can probably get it online because it's very cool.
Yeah.
Very cool. But no, with Terminator 6, bro, I mean, I think you're right. I think it's time to... close the book on this franchise. I hate saying that, but it has been butchered a bit too much, and I think the best thing to do is to do a complete and utter reboot. You know, literally remake the first film, except make it take place in like 2000 whatever.
Yeah.
I don't like film remakes. I never have. I prefer films to be classic, but if they're gonna take this merchant or take this I guess
concept
brand and make money out of it. You know, what they could also do is instead of doing movies, they could do a TV series that's all about the future war. I mean, I would love to have seen like a TV show that's just James Cameron's future war and talk about like, you know, especially with the way that TV shows have bigger budgets now.
Yeah, exactly.
Do something like Walking Dead, right? Yeah, where they're fighting Terminators. Because look, Terminator 2's budget back in the day was impressive, but nowadays that's like a one season of Walking Dead, right?
Yeah.
Maybe even less. So you could do like a story where you have the future war and from beginning to end on a TV show with several different seasons, and then you climax it with the finale, and that's it. You could do that and stretch the series out, but they also want to give Arnold, like, you know, he has to be the star, and they can't really do that if they do this, unless they have like the T6 T800s with the real skin, the Arnold skin going around. But that he's already old as it is.
Yeah, well, the Arnold skin is like one model of the T800. Like even in the original Terminator, for example, during the whole flashback scene with Kyle Reese, when he has the picture and then like a Terminator breaks into their underground bunker and starts killing everyone, that wasn't Arnold. It was played by Arnold's friend, fellow bodybuilder Franco Columbu. So they could definitely do it, even though he was just only briefly shown. For me...
Well, I know that they have that guy, Brett Azar, is coming back to do the body double stuff for Arnold in this movie, which is what he did in Terminator 5.
I mean, for me, the thing is that I feel like, even though obviously I love Arnold in this role, like he's great, I feel like there's definitely other people they could have play the Terminator in future movies.
Remember The Rock was supposed to be a Terminator?
Exactly. I think The Rock would be a great choice. Another person maybe would be like Vin Diesel. You know, there's certain actors out there who could definitely play like a T-800. And, you know, speaking of like a TV show, I think that like Netflix would be a great place for it if they were to do one, because Netflix has a lot less restrictions. They could basically have a radar show. And recently they had a sci-fi series called Altered Carbon, which was like, you know, really high budget, you know, comparative to like a blockbuster movie, and, you know, really great special effects and really interesting high concept, you know, dealing with humanity and robotics. So, you know, I feel like they could handle it and they could do a good job with it, but it really depends what direction James Cameron wants to go in, and I guess it depends on if this film's good, because I want it to be good. I want it to be another great Terminator movie, but, you know, after 3 other ones at this point, after Terminator 2, it's getting harder and harder to see that becoming an actual reality.
Right. I don't know. It's just this franchise seems to be going in circles now, man, and I honestly feel like, you know, 3 was a step down. 4, I think, again, people might not agree, but I think 4 kind of went in the right direction because I got tired of them going back to the past. And then 5 was unnecessary. You know what I mean? Like, I think 5 was meant to capitalize purely on nostalgia by using imagery and characters from the first 2 films. Yeah. That's what they were doing. You know, they didn't have to do that, though. They could have made the John Connor story with him and his wife, whatever her name is. Claire Danes played her in...
I forget her name. Catherine Brewster, I think. Was.
Yeah, Brewster, yeah. They could do that, you know, and that's another thing, too, is every Terminator movie has all these unanswered questions that never get answered. Like Terminator 3, they had the whole thing where the T-800 killed John and then Catherine Brewster in the future reprogrammed him, right? And they never really explained that story either. Like, there's all these unraveled mysteries that they keep thinking they're going to make more movies, and then they never end up making more movies. So is this going to be one of those things where Terminator 6 will erase 3, 4, and 5, and then 7 erases 3, 4, 5, and 6, and we just keep playing this game? We're just going to keep doing unofficial sequels to 2 forever?
Until James Cameron finally sits in that damn chair and directs the movie himself.
I don't even want him to anymore, bro. I want him to just retire. No more Avatar. No more Terminator. Just move on. I'm done with it. But let us know in the comments what you think about Terminator 6 and what could happen and what you think. This whole thing. I mean, they just started shooting in June, so they're not done yet, obviously, but very early stages for the film. So hopefully we'll get it soon. I don't even know when it's coming out.
I think next year.
I think with November 2019. Yeah, November 2019. Yeah, which is right before Star Wars Episode 9. So here we go again. 2019. A Dragon Ball movie in theaters. A Terminator movie in theaters. A Star Wars movie in theaters. It's 2015 all over again.
It's the 1990s all over again.
And don't forget, Avengers 4.
It's like I'm a kid again.
Anyway, check out Laughing Stock Cinema.
Later.
We'll talk to you soon.